Please speak up if you're going to address the board. Identify yourself and your residence. We have on the consent agenda tonight minutes from July 30th, August 13th, and August 22nd. We have two proclamations. One for the Concord Mill Dam's 50th anniversary. Whereas the Concord Mill Dams was formed 50 years ago for the twin purpose of providing services to the town and promoting fellowship, and whereas many of these service organizations and departments of the town of Concord were originally started by and continue to need the services of committed volunteers, and whereas Mill Dam members have been and continue to be volunteers for many organizations, including but not limited to the Council on Aging, the Open Table, the Concord Free Public Library, and Emerson Hospital. And whereas the Mill Dams enjoy wonderful book groups, museum trips, interesting speakers, and other pleasant social events, and whereas the Mill Dams continue to offer 2 scholarships each year to graduating high school seniors who've received special education services and are college bound. And now, therefore, we, the Select Board of the Town of Concord, Massachusetts, celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Concord Mill Dams and do hereby recognize the Concord Mill Dams' many contributions to the town over the past 50 years. The second proclamation is Small Business Saturday, November 24, 2018. Whereas the government of Concord, Mass. Celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are currently 30.2 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all businesses with employees in the United States and are responsible for 65.9% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2017. And whereas small businesses employ 47.5% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, and whereas 90% of the consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has had a positive impact on their community, and whereas 89% of consumers who are aware of a Small Business Saturday say the day encouraged them to shop small all year long. And whereas 73% of consumers who reportedly shop small at independently owned retailers and restaurants on Small Business Saturday did so with friends or family. And whereas the most reported reason for consumers aware of the day to shop and dine at small independently owned businesses was to support their community, 64%. And whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, we, the Select Board of the Town of Concord, Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim November 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. We now have one-day special licenses. The Thoreau School PTG on November 3rd from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. at 37 Lexington Road, Wine and Malt. First Parish, October 27th, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 20 Lexington Road, all alcohol. And Development Strategy Consultants, 1027, 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., 200 Strawberry Hill Road, all alcohol.
Move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Town manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. October 20th is Discover West Concord Day on this coming Saturday from 10 to 3. Lots of fun things to do for the kids. And a haunted retail tour of Concord Center is planned for October 27th to encourage retail business sales. I met with the Finance Committee last Thursday night and presented my preliminary thoughts on the budget, which I think I circulated to the board. Finance Director projects a 2.6% increase in budget capacity, so there'll be some challenges this fall to work out a budget. The Light Board was considering eliminating the 3-tier rate structure that they've had in place for a number of years, but ultimately decided to leave it in place for at least for a while longer. The Giroux land planning process is continuing. The second public forum will be held tomorrow night, October 16th, here in the townhouse, starting at 7 p.m. to get the public comments on how the Giroux property on Commonwealth Avenue could be reused and converted into a park. The intersection at Commonwealth Ave and Main Street, in conjunction with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, new traffic signals were installed, which will help with the confusion that people experienced. And also the DOT has laid out the proposed change of cutting back the corner about 12 feet. It will require moving some of the pedestrian signals that are there, but they seem to be moving forward. We expect work to start this week. So although contracts haven't been signed or financial amendments agreed to, they seem to be moving forward in the interest of getting it done this fall. There are 2 large affordable housing projects planned for our town line, one on the Concord Sudbury line, known as Quarry North, I think, and another one on the Acton, near Concord's town line in Acton and Maynard. The first is 275 units and the other is 255 units. And the Planning Director, Marcia Rasmussen, will be visiting you in 2 weeks to talk about those 2 projects and whether she has any concerns for Concord interests. Also on your schedule for next time is Affordable Housing Advisory Committee coming in, a proposal for a permanent building committee, and a draft committee charge for the Concord Cultural Center Committee, and an update on the Giroux land planning. Public Works reported that the recycling drop-off event went well on Saturday. The swap-off event was canceled due to threatening weather, when 866 residents participated in the drop-off portion. The no left turn on Musketequid Road, and those signs have come down. The police chief did a 2-week, 14-day trial, gathered the information, and that information will be turned over to our traffic engineer, who will then utilize that to make a recommendation. And after we study, I think it's about 15 other intersections and turning restrictions to come up with a comprehensive plan. Sergeant Paul Flynn announced his plans to retire on October 19th after 32 years of service. We wish him well. Verizon Wireless will be back speaking with the assistant town manager. We'll be going forward with their Kais Road application, but asked that if they get turned down by town boards or other authorities, that they'd be given serious consideration about being allowed to locate in the Emerson Umbrella Building, which is the best location they've been able to identify. And finally, we're saddened to learn of the passing of Annabelle Shepard, who was she and her husband were the honored citizens in 1988, and she served on the Select Board as well as the Finance Committee, Board of Assessors, and many other community activities. Thank you.
Questions or comments from the board?
Is there an update on the parking, Cars Road parking lot?
The town engineer is here, so Chris Albrecht. Chris, would you mind speaking into a mic?
Sure.
Fortunately,
Hi, thank you. Yes, we do have an update. It should be paving with the weather. We've had some delays, and we did a change in the contract to accommodate some of the alley in between the area. So that change came about this past week, and so we're looking to pave Wednesday and Thursday of Friday this week, to open.
And the lines,
Lines will be shortly thereafter, correct? And we're gonna get the lines back on Monument Street at the same time at that time, so in case anybody's asking about that. But if that changes, we'll let everybody know.
Anybody else? Tonight's meeting is our first one since September 24th. We've got 24 agenda items, so I'll be somewhat brief. At the meeting on the 24th, the police and fire chiefs both expressed concern regarding insufficient Verizon broadband coverage in Concord Center area and possible safety concerns. Unfortunately, since that meeting, there was an incident of a propane tank rupture, and the Verizon drop calls were a definite problem during the emergency that required evacuation of some of the residents. We are stepping up efforts to find a suitable location for the cell tower. As the town manager reported, The Kai's Road is being re-examined. They're going to hire somebody to really look into that. I think that any commitment we make would be that we would give serious consideration to other locations, not necessarily prioritize the umbrella. We're hoping that there are other locations that might be suitable and would be more amenable to the citizens who live in the general area. I also want to comment on the special town meeting and thank those citizens who took the night to come to the high school for the meeting. The attendance was 390, which is only slightly less than the first night of a regular town meeting. We were able to pass articles regarding the settlement of W.R. Grace, and the select board met on October 10th to complete the necessary select board vote to allow for the completion of the settlement. The acceptance of the gift of White Pond was appreciated. Many of those concerned that were expressed will be part of the planning process. And I know the police chief and school superintendent were grateful for the funding of the additional school resource position. And there was a healthy discussion regarding the funding for legal services, which also passed. We are going to be discussing the town manager search and consultant selection process now that we have approval of the funds for the hiring of the consultant. I've submitted a list of names to the board for their review for nominations for the search committee. And I want to thank all those who've made suggestions and or volunteered. I'm now far more sympathetic to college admissions officers who have a limited number of spaces and far more qualified applications. That's just part of the process. We've got a lot of volunteers in the town who are terrific people, and we wanted to limit the committee to 9, so we were forced to not have people who would have been wonderful members. I also just want to remind people that October 20th and Saturday, we're going to have a forum on effective governance for town committees, boards, and commission volunteers. With that, we'll move to the 7:05 continued public hearing, alteration of premises for alcohol service, Neshota Country Club, Inc., 1861 Sudbury Road. Good evening.
Good evening, members of the board and Mr. Chair. My name is Boris Lobig. I'm the clubhouse manager over at Neshota, and I'm here for this hearing because we're in the process of hoping to amend our current club liquor license. We're in the process of...
We need to move to
open the hearing.
continue
Okay.
hearing.
Move to open the public hearing. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Sorry.
No worries at all. We're in the process of trying to amend our liquor license. The construction basically will tear down the entire, not the entire clubhouse, most of the clubhouse where our current liquor license, where we can currently serve our liquor. We're in the process, we're trying to move over to the annex building, which is a very confined space, but we're hoping to basically be able to serve liquors for our members out of that location.
The renovation is starting this month, is that correct?
It was due to start this month. I think best case scenario at this point will be February, so I think we're just probably trying to do our due diligence, be a little preventive maintenance, and trying to get all our ducks in a row, you know. I would like to say that I think, you know, the amendment of the liquor license could be time sensitive to, you know, where we, you know, send it out to the ABCC when we have the set date. Again, we're just trying to do our preventive maintenance.
Is this new, the building that you're looking to move, like, this is associated with the pool, correct?
It is. Yep, it is. It's basically the pool snack bar.
There's a place there where you secure the liquor.
There is.
And is this a permanent change, or is this an interim change while you're doing the construction?
Interim change, so we're able to serve, liquor to our members, because all of that space where we're currently able to serve our liquor will
That's
be
what's going
gone.
down.
It will be totally gone.
But your intent is to, when it's rebuilt, that you'll move back into the new space that you're building?
Right, exactly, but we don't actually have those exact drawings quite yet.
I know there've been submitted a number of photographs and other information, so. Any other questions or comments? Do I have a close the public here?
Move to
Or
close.
actually, do any public have comments that they would like to make? See none, now we might,
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
and we now ready to, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Do we have a motion to approve the application?
Yep, we move to approve the application of the Shada Country Club, Inc. for the alteration of the premises for alcohol service to allow for alcohol to be served in the outdoor patio areas, as detailed on the revised plan submitted October 4th, 2018. Final approval is subject to ABCC review.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We now have common particular license, Marvin Road LLC, doing business as Reason to Be Cheerful, 110 Commonwealth Avenue.
7:10 public hearing.
710 public, oh, it's a, oh, I'm sorry, yep, I jumped ahead. 710, public hearing, grant of location, National Grid, Verizon, Comcast, and Concord Municipal Light Plant to open the grounds to install and maintain natural gas, National Grid, Telecommunications, Verizon and Comcast, and Electric, CMLP, in Cambridge Turnpike from Lexington Road to Crosby's Corner.
I moved to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Once again, Chris Albright's the town engineer, and he's managing the construction project for Public Works.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, so basically this is a little bit different. I'm not sure how many members of the board have dealt with granted locations before, but generally it's the utility that's coming before you due to the nature of the project and it being a Public Works project designed by our engineers and overseen by our engineers. And so we came before, and pulled it together, the grant location. The grant location and the subsequent pole relocations all reference the design plans that we have, before that are phase one, are under contract currently with J. Tropiano. And the second set of plans, which is phase two, which is essentially the bridge crossings, those are set to be bid within the next few weeks. So, but the plans are pretty much where we need them to be. The flexibility that we asked for from the board is, normal construction tolerances. If you encounter something within underground, that we would amend that. But of course, we have engineers on board, on site, that would make those determinations. And so the final grant to location would then be subsequently approved under, as we normally would, with the as-built plans. And that would be the formal record and the formal record of grant to location by the board. So that's what we'd like to do.
And this will cover the entire project,
Yes, sir.
but you'll do it, of course, and it'll be done in phases. But
Yes, sir. So the first phase, if you've been down there, if you've seen it, it's started, but this particular are for the dry utilities, the utilities that are normally associated, gas, electric, telecommunications. So we've started with the water, and we'll move on to drainage, but I suspect that we'll be into the utilities under this grant to location within a month, or there and abouts. So we're here before that. The one outlier is, of course, National Grid.
portion of service to the folks along the,
So they're not, they pretty much Verizon and Comcast, the telecommunications are not able to, if it's a small disruption of service, it's very temporary, and they do outreach from our understanding, similar to electric as well. It's crossovers. Water, there isn't, you're not allowed to have any disruptions of water. Unforeseen circumstances are one thing, but from my understanding, there's no interruption of service. You know, a lot of people do business from home and things like that, so very cognizant of interruption of service. Nothing like that's anticipated.
You've submitted a memorandum dated October 4th with 8 conditions and recommendations, which would be incorporated within this, I take.
Correct, yes. And most of them are pretty standard, but some of them are, most of them deal with as I said, the major one would be the allowance of construction. But this one's a little different because we have our eyes and hands all over it, so.
Very good.
Do you anticipate a problem with a project delay because of the national grid split?
It's difficult to say because the project duration is expected to span over the course of, you know, this year into the next and possibly depending on how things go the following. I don't anticipate an overall upset in the schedule, but the one outlier is, of course, we can't progress with certain aspects of the job without having these things worked out. And so it's our hope that this comes to an end soon for everybody's sake, but
So what if
for-
it doesn't? What happens to the project? Does it delay
Well-
the start? Can we move with the electrical work and then?
Yes.
Delay the conduit installation?
And that's the plan currently. So it was our hope, and they were actually in town and they were ready to move on it. And then June 24th came and they halted everything. And then with the overpressurization now in Woburn, I spoke to their representative today, and the DPU has essentially forced them. So even if we wanted to somehow put pressure on National Grid to, say, listen, this isn't maybe not an emergency situation, but it should be top priority because this has been in the works. You were already in town, and that was our game plan. But now with the state mandate coming down from the department, their hands are tied. They couldn't come in if they wanted to.
Well, what happens if you open the ground and you get everything done, but gas isn't done? You're gonna cover it back up and then open it back up?
Well, we wouldn't top. So the worst case scenario right now, and I hope it doesn't get to this, but would be we might have to, once we reconstruct the other utilities, once we reconstruct the roadway, we do the, deep ground improvements, and I don't want to get into the entire project, but for those of you that know, it's a major construction project, raising the road. We would proceed with all those items, and then we would hold off on topping the road as long as we can in the event that they would have to come in and cut through the binder. If that is the case, they're looking at major, issues like this all around. I mean, they have projects started in Boston, I think Mass Ave Bridge, I think they have implications and exposure, and not just, back delays, but financial exposure, what that would mean, how they would, rectify the fact that they've cut into our new binder and pavement. These are all things that we would have to address at the time. I hope it doesn't get to that point.
But those would be their expenses.
It would have to be, but the problem is, the recuperation of costs, and it's just an extra burden on the town that I don't think anybody wants to, but we certainly wouldn't want to absorb any costs on their account, and we wouldn't.
So let's assume that this gets going and that the strike ends and they're allowed to go back and lay line. I'm curious about the question that Mike asked about whether there's a disruption of service. I noticed that when you disconnect the current gas line, there are certain houses that are being serviced by the gas lines that are there. So you lay the whole new gas line, or they lay the whole new gas line without a disruption of service, and then there's a cutover?
Correct. So there's a conversion. So the old gas main would then, be in place. It would be live, but then they would subsequently, individually, and this is where that temporary interruption of service is. So it's not but they do their outreach similar to like a water service where they would come through with the water main. You either have temporary water main in place, or you have a bypass that allows for that time period of that switchover. But so we don't anticipate. It might be wintertime. It might be. I mean, people are using their heat already.
Right.
I know my wife is. So it's getting to that point, and so there can't be. They just they can't. I'm sure there are MGLs that prevent them from allowing to do that.
And their plan is for them to abandon the current pipe in the ground. And is that common practice and safe to do?
Well, it's abandoned. It's the
We're worrying
safety
about
of
safety
it.
these days as we see what's happening in other communities.
Well, the safety of it is, I would say, obviously there's been a huge emphasis put on natural gas and the spotlight's on. The safety of it in my opinion, I haven't encountered, gas to the degree of what happened. I don't think the nation has it made nationwide news. But to say that leaving the pipe in place has no effect is I wouldn't agree with that. That's their contention, and they say that. But for us, when we have to work around that infrastructure and not knowing if something's live or not, our crews deal with that pretty consistently. And with sometimes, mismarkings and things like that, it does make it challenging. Is it so much of a safety concern? I would say it's more of a concern that it really delays our projects and slows us down a lot, as opposed to a safety concern. We've had hits, if you hit a gas line, it's scary, but generally they're responsive and, it's well contained and it's okay.
And we have no recourse to have them removed.
Well,
We've had many discussions and attempts, and I'm not sure how.
I thought
Yeah, I'm not. It's gotten to the it's getting there. But what happens is they essentially say, I mean, National Grid has their bottom line, and they say, well, then we just
You want it
won't
out,
do
you
it.
take it out.
Yeah, it's they're in town. They're trying to stay ahead of our paving projects. I'll give them credit because half of our roadway cuts are National Grid doing leak repairs and doing things. So over half of the permits for the entire year are National Grid. So it's not as if they're not doing anything. Can things be improved? Certainly. Can we push them so much to the point where they say, well, you're pushing us and this isn't economically feasible for me to replace this now. We're just not going to do it. And then we'll come in and punch in through your brand new road when we have to. I mean, that's also their option. So it's a difficult line to walk.
And can I assume when the project's done and the new gas line is installed, that will fix the leak on Cambridge Turnpike?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
For certain.
That
Yeah. So the
odoriferous
leak is, that leak is, it's very challenging because of the material of the roadway, and I think that's probably been pretty well documented, the 70 feet of peat, and it just
Yeah.
compresses over time, and what that does to that it just causes fatigue, and over time, the corrosion, it doesn't help that it's all underwater consistently, and so, but no, the newer pipe, it's plastic, it's more flexible, and it's brand new, so there should not be any leaks. I
correct
mean,
that leak.
as long as I
yeah,
am here. Longer than that.
yeah.
Any other
you.
questions? Does the public have any comments?
Just a couple-
Oh,
Up, please come
your
forward and
microphone.
identify yourself and state your address.
John McCarthy, 14 Mildred Circle, just off of Cambridge Turnpike. You mentioned poles, but it was my understanding that everything was going underground. You talking about just removing the old poles, or is stuff still going to be above ground?
No, there'll still be items above ground. So Verizon and Comcast are pole relocations with overlashes. That's in the second phase or second section of the first phase, meaning from essentially Hawthorne through the rest of the way. So what we underground and what they were required to underground as part of the funding and all that was the area from Lexington Road, that intersection, down through that first crossing. And then CMLP will be undergrounding. They'll have, right, if I'm not mistaken, CMLP will have theirs undergrounded, but the entire Verizon and Comcast and all the other utilities are not undergrounded in the roadway.
So they're going to be underground until Mildred Circle, right? You said first intersection.
About
'cause
Hawthorne. There's a pole right there. I think it's 30.
they're going to come. So they're going to come up and then come down on the next pole because they all go underground to go to Mildred.
Yeah, no, they come up. Well, if it's going underneath, they'll be overlaps. So if they're above there now, wherever they're coming up after Mildred will be above. I mean, we're not gonna, if Mildred's underground corrected, so that will remain. There's an easement there that goes through, that's not being touched. But where we come up on Cambridge Turnpike after, Hawthorne Lane, right in that area, it stays as an overlash.
Thank you.
Sure.
We have another hand up? Yes, couple more, okay.
My name is Dong Zhou. I'm 41 Sydney Lane, right after Cambridge Turnpike. So our old neighbor actually discussed with, I think you guys before about that, the underground cable and from the Hawthorne Lane all the way to the traffic light. So now the decision, you said the decision is still that, still the above ground? So that means the electrical cable also above ground, right?
No, electrical is electrical.
Uh-huh. Is underground.
Is underground.
Good, good, yeah.
Telecommunications, because they're separate entities.
Yeah.
So the telecommunications, Comcast and Verizon are remaining on the poles. The only thing that we're doing is we're moving poles to accommodate the sidewalk.
Okay.
So all those poles, normally it's 3 feet above, so we have a few poles that are that outside. All the poles that need to be moved to accommodate the sidewalk will be moved to make a accessible sidewalk, but.
Thank you. Then how about the fiber optic from the town?
I believe they're making provisions within CMLPs. Obviously, they're future, so they have that, so
Also, they also go in the ground too, right?
I'm assuming that's all one. Thank you. I'm glad you came.
Well, that's good.
Very separate entities, so we all
Okay,
work
that's good.
together.
That's good. So that you guys mentioned about the interruption of service, or the temporarily. So I'm concerned about the electricity. So will there be any interruption, or there's any foreseeable interruption that will be notified ahead of time, or there won't be any interruption?
Well, there's not any anticipated interruption with the exception of how long you can come.
Good evening, Jeff Cosgrove, electrical engineer from the Town of Concord Light Department. Hope everybody's doing well. So any interruption, for instance, if it's an existing, you live on City Lane, sir?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cineland, yeah.
So when we transition to the new underground system, it'll be a limited outage. You're talking anywhere at the max 2 or 3 hours.
Okay, that's great. Yeah,
And it'll
yeah.
just be that one day.
Okay. So that another question about that, is there any plan that to extend the natural gas pipeline to all the way to the Cosby Corner?
Yeah, so that was another question that I received, and we've been receiving that. My understanding from that is that there was outreach done, as we know that this project has been going on a long time, that there was outreach done at the time,
Yeah.
maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and they provided a cost to the homeowners, to the abutters. I think there was somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 12 customers, if I'm not mistaken, that would have been affected by it, and that there wasn't the interest, and maybe there was some interest on a few, but there wasn't the interest enough for the people, for National Grid to approve it. So people saw the costs, and I'm just speaking from what I've heard. I thought before the gas conversion, as people know, there's a gas conversion inside the home. Just to extend the main, I think it was in the vicinity of $10,000 a home.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit more than people wanted to spend, because then you're talking an additional $10,000 to $12,000 for a home conversion. I think that was just outside of what people
Okay.
were comfortable with.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that what that stands. So because
Yeah,
now the road being
well-
dig up, and then
No, it's true, and we, from our perspective, we would have liked to have seen it happen because, people change, but now, people talking going back to gas, but we always like to have at least the infrastructure underground, so we were hopeful that it would happen. It just didn't seem like the interest was there.
I see. So that just one naive question about my last question. So that the sewer line. So will it extend it over to that area, or no? We just no plan to do that.
No, again, that's, the sewer was not part of the town's comprehensive wastewater permit, so they don't have the capacity to
Okay.
accommodate those.
And one more question. Sorry about that.
Keep coming.
In front of our house and this ditch. So there is because our concern is that the water actually from Sandy Pond actually come over underneath that ditch and then go to our property. So we haven't seen any provision about how we're going to deal with that. So is that going to be a bridge raised up, and then to cut off the water coming over to the city land side?
Correct. So that whole area is going to be raised to accommodate a new culvert passing, because right now it's undersized. So what happens is the road floods multiple times.
Yes.
So because we're not increasing, volume, the Crosby Corner project already did that for us. So we were able to secure the funding. That's what allowed the town to secure the funding from the state. So what our design does is it mitigates the flooding.
Yeah.
And mitigates that, but we're not changing the amount of flows. For example, if you were getting water, any water that you were seeing as a result, it was either getting through the pipe before, or it was then flooding over the road and getting to you anyway. So we don't have the ability to change drainage patterns from Lincoln and that. So we don't anticipate whatever's getting to that point now
Would be the same.
would be the same, because there's no increase in volume.
Okay, because I just don't want to turn into a lakefront property. So.
Well, I can't have that happen either.
But
Thank you. I
very
think
much.
we have another person, so we can get.
David Schwartz on 383 Cambridge Turnpike. So I understand that the National Grid stuff is ongoing, but have they determined where in the right-of-way the gas lines are going to be, if they're going to be in the roadway or on the side?
Right, so outside of your separate issue, you know, they have a few others to work with, and that was, as I told you before, when I've had ongoing discussions with Mr. Schwartz. He's had he purchased the home, and he has, you know, bushes and shrubs that he would like to save. Of course, we'd love to accommodate that. The previous National Grid design did not account for that, even though the bushes and things are within the town right-of-way. We're not in the, you know, business of making people unhappy if there's a better scenario. And so what we did, and what we're continuing to do, is to push this is the high-pressure main now, out into the roadway. And that would prevent the need for cutting down those bushes. That's what we hope to do, and that's what I've committed to doing, and I still hope to, for sure. I just can't, we haven't made any progress, and they don't have any communication right now. Anybody who's engineering is out doing other things right now. So I wish I could tell you that we've made progress on that front, but I can tell you that it was an amicable discussion at the time, and they were, you know, I think it's frankly a better design anyway, maybe because I came up with it. Maybe I'm biased too.
Funny how that happens.
It doesn't snake back out and in, is what I'm saying. Theirs seem to meander more, and it just makes more sense to go within one quarter of the roadway and then back over, and that's what we hope to do.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other public comments? We are ready perhaps to close.
Yeah, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks. We have now,
Do we need a motion on that?
yes.
So let's see. I move to approve the petition of National Grid, Verizon, Comcast, and CMLP to open the ground to install and maintain natural gas, telecommunications, and electricity in Cambridge Turnpike from Lexington Road to Crosby's Corner. The location of the aforementioned utility shall be placed in reasonable accordance with within typical construction tolerances and in compliance with contract plans and specifications for the Cambridge Turnpike Phase 1 roadway improvements project dated 5/16/2018 and Cambridge Turnpike Improvements Project Phase 2 dated September 2018, or as amended and approved by the town in the field during construction and documented in as-built plans. The limits of the proposed utilities will begin at STA 11 plus 45, I wish I knew what that meant, and end at STA 76 plus 90, subject to the conditions recommended by Concord Public Works memo dated October 4th, 2018.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank
Those
you.
are just designations of pole locations.
We assumed it.
I couldn't tell you what STA stands for.
Station.
There you
Of
go.
course, thank you.
Okay, now we are ready for the common particular license, Marble Rose LLC, DBA Reason to be Cheerful, 110 Commonwealth Avenue. Hi, good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Philip Rosenfield. I'm a resident of Wayland, and I am also the principal sole owner of Marble Rose LLC. Marble Rose LLC is the owner of Reasons to be Cheerful Ice Cream in West Concord. And
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome to town.
Everybody loves ice cream.
The well-esteemed, I should say, well-esteemed Reasons to be Cheerful Ice Cream, I hope. And I'm here to apply for a common victualer's license tonight. I've submitted application with signed approval from Health Department, Building Department, Water and Sewer, and also submitted as is up-to-date, as is built building plans and up-to-date as we speak here today. And I'm here to introduce myself and answer any questions you may have.
What's the change that what are you envisioning differently about Reasons to be Cheerful?
Well, none. The plans are, the build plans are as-is plans, and essentially they carry it's an up-to-date version so that you have a current record on
Okay.
file.
Reasons has been a great addition to the town, and the former owner has been a terrific addition too.
We'll have him,
Most of the time.
Has he warned you how many committees that we like to involve?
But he's not a
He's from Wayland.
resident.
Oh, but
well,
He's gonna
as a
okay,
business
actually,
owner in
so
town.
just to follow that point, I'm on a board with Jane, the West Concord Junction Committee, and also the West Concord Business Committee, and happy to follow Wade's lead and do what I can on behalf of Reasons to be Cheerful to see West Concord, to participate in Concord business and especially see West Concord.
Well, we very much encourage that, so I'm glad to hear that.
Sure. Yep.
All input is helpful. So.
Yep. So are there any other questions I'd be happy to address?
Everything, all the paperwork is in order and
Yeah.
everything's been approved.
The Board of Health came and said fine, and so I think we're all in order, so
Yeah.
Okay, so I move to approve the application of Marvin Rose LLC, doing business as Reasons to be Cheerful, for a new common victualer's license. The total amount of seating will be 12 seats.
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Did you bring some?
And victuals for all.
Yes, now ready for the senior tax exemption and impact on tax rate. Board of Assessors.
Good evening. My name is Christian Fisher, Chair of the Board of Assessors. With me tonight is the Town Assessor, Lane Partridge, whom I'm sure you all know. Another member of the committee, Cindy Rainier, in the audience here. And tonight we're here to discuss and perhaps answer questions about the funding of the senior tax exemption, the resulting difference in tax rates, and options for dealing with the resulting difference in tax rates. In the upcoming classification hearing, the Select Board must decide whether they want to shift the burden somewhat from residential to commercial industrial. While many of the other neighboring towns have higher commercial rates, Concord for many years has maintained an equal tax rate for residential and commercial, primarily because roughly 92% of the taxable value in town is residential, and it hasn't been seen as practical. The senior means tax exemption was introduced this year to help needy seniors reduce their taxes. We have approved 49 applications amounting to $199,000, 413, or approximately $200,000. Because of the way the senior means tax exemption is written and implemented, it would result in an increase in the residential tax rate of 3 cents over the commercial, industrial, and personal property tax rate. So it would be a little bit higher, 3 cents higher than the business rate. You know, the issues with this are whether we would want to introduce for the first time a difference in the tax rate of 3 cents. The second issue, probably more important, is that because we are required to tax to the exact penny and no fraction of a penny, that it leaves us with a $21,000 shortfall in funding for the senior tax exemption, which would have to come out of the overlay. And those are primarily the two issues with it. And the options for dealing with that are just simply take the 3 cents, add the 3 cents in the residential tax rate, and take the rest, the $20,000 out of the, or $21,000, 708 out of the overlay. Or there's an option to raise the CIP or business tax rate, 3 cents, which would result in paying down another $15,706 with a smaller shortfall of $6,000, which would come out of the overlay. So those are the issues, and it was felt in the Board of Assessors that we should for the upcoming classification hearing, inform you of that situation, and answer any questions you might have about why that's happening and maybe what the options are.
If you were to have the 3-cent differential this year, would there be then an additional 3 to 4 cents next year on top of that? So each year, the differential will increase?
I think that would depend on the number of
For
applications
applicants.
we received, if we receive more applications, but I'm going to let Lane.
And
answer that
presumably,
question.
the 49 will likely qualify again if they're still residing there.
I think the cent change, 3 cent, 4 cent, whatever it works out to be, is dependent on who applies and what their circumstances are. We could have the exact same people apply, and the number could go up or go down. So I don't think it's, from what I've kind of looked at this after we talked, and I don't think it's cumulative.
Okay.
I'm sorry to be confused. Why is there a shortfall?
The tax rate has to be rounded to the penny. There's no fractions of a penny. So we, every year, have to balance to that penny. We do that by adding or subtracting to the overlay account.
And it just comes in and out of the overlay as necessary.
As necessary, yeah. So we've, to rounding to the penny on the residential side only, we missed by $21,000, so.
So 49, the number of applicants you got, 49, is about, if I recollect correctly, about not quite a third, a little more than a third of what I remember you folks estimating would be eligible. I know it's just an estimate.
Right.
It was like 120 something, as I recall.
Well, yeah, it's always been something that's
yeah.
not estimable,
Black
because
box.
we do have in town, the Department of Revenue of the state informed us that there's 250 people that get the circuit breaker on their income taxes. So,
That has to get pared down because some have property greater than median value.
Correct.
So the point of my question wasn't really to pin you down on
Yeah,
some
it's-
estimate. It was, so this $20,000 shortfall could have been larger?
yes, and it could be next year, depending on appropriations and everything else, the penny could be on the higher side. So we could be off, a penny in Concord is roughly $66,000. So if we missed on the higher side, we could have a shortfall of $60,000. So, because we can't raise more than,
And
Then-
what's the capacity of the overlay account?
Right.
yeah, the overlay account, I mean, we put a number in every year to cover, and I think Carrie would say when we talk about that and estimate it, we always kind of, have a nice leeway in there. We can certainly absorb the 21, that's not a problem.
What's its balance?
I don't know at this point.
Yes, I mean, just order
I
of
think it's $1
magnitude.
million, somewhere in there, somewhere a little north of $1 million at this point.
But each year you set, what's it set at, like 350,000 or something?
Yeah,
like
I
that?
think
So
it's,
There's some, there's a reserve.
do you know what the overlay is this year? 540? 540 this year. Yep. But if you look at that as a percentage of the levy, you're holding us to an
Yeah, no,
awfully
no,
high
no,
standard.
What? Can't come within 1/10 of 1%?
1/10 of a
What's the
percent,
matter
yeah.
And you recommend what? Gotcha, huh?
Yeah, I think that we've maintained the uniform tax rate for so long. I think it would be good to keep doing that. We're not talking about a huge impact onto the commercial industrial side of things. And I think PR-wise, I think it would look better that the residential is not paying a higher tax rate than the commercial industrial. And if they're all the same, I think PR-wise, it would be easier to deal with for my department, if that's a recommendation.
Well, I think the principle of having the same is one we've upheld on the board here for as long as I've been.
Yeah.
As long as I've been here.
It goes back, I think, to the 80s, wasn't it, when the last time it was split, Chris?
90s.
90s, yeah.
And I don't think 3 cents is sort of a deal breaker type thing, that if we were talking a great deal more, then it might be more problematic, but I would tend to agree that keeping it the same makes some sense. I don't know what other board members.
So I'm having trouble making the numbers mean something to me. I'm sorry about that. I'm looking at your memo. Well, I'm looking at your memo and I see a rate of 7 cents on the tax rate. So, but you're talking 3 cents.
Right.
So what happened to the other 4 cents? Sorry.
We didn't have, so the maximum amount that the town could give away was 0.5% of the levy. So that's what, if we maxed out and we had so many people apply that we were at the 0.5% of the levy, it would have been 7 cents.
Okay.
So we didn't have that many people apply, so it's less.
So that's your question. If we get more applications next
Right.
year, are we at that 7 cents, which could compound what we currently do
Yeah.
this year for
Right.
3
Good.
cents?
But we won't actually set the rate tonight. You'll come back to us
Right.
as a formal part of our agenda to actually to set the rates, right?
Yeah, the board,
At the
Chris.
classification hearing, yeah.
Yeah, Chris at our last meeting brought this up, we discussed it, and we just thought you should know what's coming. It wasn't, we will have better documentation and more thorough documentation in the tax analysis document that we always give to you a week before the classification hearing. So we'll know numbers a lot tighter at that point, but the concept is a difficult one, to say the least, and we wanted to make sure that we were kind of out in front of it with you, so that if you had questions, then maybe we wouldn't have the answers, we could get them before you got to the classification.
What, you're meeting next week? Or is it end of this week?
The,
Next Board of Assessors meeting?
as soon as we leave the room.
Yeah, that's right.
We're gonna double up tonight, so
Yeah.
we're gonna
Very
go in the
efficient,
other room.
yes.
You're all here.
So to the point of the numbers and the potential for it to potentially triple what we have today, what is your sense? Again, this is the first year, so I would assume that this would be the lowest number, and that maybe building on the not, as the town understands this and as residents understand this more and more, and I would imagine that would go up.
I would think as it catches on. it's
You're
going to-
exactly,
Yeah, more
so-
people are going to participate, the applications are going to go up, and those cents are going to go up too.
Right.
But the standards will remain the same, so.
Well, and the cap remains the same. I mean,
Lane's thinking
as a-
about
as a
that.
percentage
Yeah.
of-
The standards change with the
Mean property
circuit
value,
breaker
the circuit
standard
breaker.
change, so.
Median property value.
Huh.
Median property values, so they go up. So the amount of income that you can get, I'm assuming, will be higher next year as far as the state, what the state sets on the circuit breaker. And if things continue, our median, single-family house value will go up as well. So I don't know if that will offset or not.
More people might be eligible, we just don't know.
We don't know. You also have, in the home rule petition that was filed, you have the option to raise the percentage of levy.
Okay.
So it was originally set for the first year at 0.5%. You can go up to as high as 1% of the levy. So if we start bumping up against the top and people aren't, and we have more people interested in it, this board can raise it. You don't have to, but you can. And then the other thing is if you don't, and we have more need than we have money, then it gets prorated down. So each person's amount that they get gets adjusted.
So did
Okay.
you do a calculation for what would this issue be if we had gone to the full allocation?
The full 0.5%,
Yeah, if we'd have,
we figured 7%, 7
That's what
cents, 7
7
cents on the
in
tax
terms
rate.
of taking money out of the overlay account though, no, I know some.
No, we didn't go to that, not to the overlay. And again, that would also depend on where the number hit, this is always a balancing act, and we always kind of, well, do we make it 16,
Yep, I get it.
17 or 16, or, you're always playing with that.
Tom said I could ask a related question. No, it's a good one. This is the first year that you've had to administer this new law. How did it go?
It was very tough on the staff. If we had more applications than we had this year, I would probably be asking for another person, at least part-time, to help out during
We talked
the
about it.
application.
We talked about that
Yeah,
one.
it's difficult to get people to understand how it works, what the requirements of it are, and to fill out the application. And there was a lot of hand-holding and, filling out applications. I even in one instance went down to a lady's house, she's 92, to help her to work out the numbers and see if she would qualify. So there was a lot of time expended by my staff to do it. If we had gotten 200 applications, we were swamped even with the
It
59
might get
that we
easier
got.
next year, though, because the
We
applicants will
understand
be
it better.
familiar,
Yeah.
your staff will be familiar. Well,
Yeah,
thank you
but
very-
it's still very difficult, and the hardest part, unfortunately, we only had about 6 of them that fall above the house value of the circuit breaker. So there was only, I think it was 6 that we had to actually calculate, could they have gotten the circuit breaker if their house was at the right number? And that became very problematic, and a lot of time was spent with a local CPA trying to figure out how to do that. If anybody has ever tried to look at the circuit breaker worksheet, it's a nightmare. I don't encourage you to try to do it yourself.
Promise I won't. Well, I hope you'll convey on our behalf, though, our thanks to the staff for the work that they did, getting this in place. It was an important initiative by the town, so.
And the committee spent a lot of time on it as well, I know, discussing some of the issues. So I think the full committee deserves a lot of thanks as well, so. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now ready for fiscal year 18 budget transfers.
Yeah, good thing you're here to explain all this. I read it.
Oh, it's not that difficult. So I'm here this evening, sort of belatedly, I think for a bunch of reasons, but I'm here to present 4 transfers to close out fiscal 18. These transfers are allowed under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 33B. I think this may be the first time that these types of transfers have been brought to you. So I would mention that prior to about 4 years ago, the law that allowed year-end transfers was far more restrictive than it is now. And that's why you haven't seen them. And we have some pretty big deficits that we're dealing with in fiscal 18. So in prior years, when the deficits were smaller, maybe we had some different options than to present this way. So as I mentioned, there are 4 deficits. The snow and ice deficit is almost $489,000. Group insurance was $119,000. Elections, $11,000, and legal services, an additional $8,000 on top of the transfers that we made from the reserve fund. So both the snow and ice deficit and the group insurance deficit could have been handled different ways. Under Mass General Law, we are allowed to carry forward a snow and ice deficit, and we have an allowance in the fiscal year budget following of $175,000. So we could have used that, and we could have tacked on the balance. But because we ended the year with appropriations in other lines that could absorb this, it seemed like it made more sense to handle it that way, rather than to push it forward and then raise taxes in fiscal 19 to cover something that we could have covered in 18 with the appropriate action by the Finance Committee and the Select Board. The group insurance, we could have closed this to our insurance trust fund. And in past years, we have done that. The reason, again, that I would prefer to handle it through the budget is the insurance trust fund is the fund that we use to support our workers' comp. Our workers' comp, we're self-insured. We have stop loss at $600,000, so we're responsible for the first $600,000 of any claim. We haven't had any claim that came close to that, but we only have about 1.2 million in that trust fund. So when there's an opportunity to do something other than use resources, it seemed like this would be a wiser thing to do. Elections, we had the special election in June. I think you heard from the town clerk, and she mentioned to you it would be, I think, about 13,000, and it came in at 11,000. And then the legal services, you all know plenty about last year's legal services budget. We did ask the Finance Committee to expend the full Finance Committee reserve, which was 200 and, now I just forgot 225. I had 250 and I had 225. But we had to estimate our May and June bills at the time. And we didn't have any additional money in the reserve anyway, and we spent that 225 plus an additional $8,000. So the way this process works is, with the approval of the Finance Committee and the Select Board, we can make these transfers. The state law does refer to doing this work in July. I can tell you the process that we have. We run our last accounts payable until July 15. Then we have to go through an analysis to see where we have funds available. It wasn't ready in time for the Finance Committee's July meeting. And then the Finance Committee did not have a regular meeting until September. I did make the Finance Committee members aware, at least the ones that attended the orientation session at the beginning of August, but just because of the meeting schedules, it didn't get to them until last month, and then you had the special town meeting, so we wanted to wait until after that.
Recovered, right?
Yes.
Be fair to say that the snow and ice deficit, that was an awful lot of the downed trees was the cause of that.
It was an awful lot of everything. It was sand and salt and trees, a lot of activity.
Miserable March.
Well, as someone who's still in the process of removing some dead trees that were hit, I can only imagine.
But they did a remarkably good job.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so that if you took a look at the memo that I sent to the Finance Committee, I originally brought them a request that assumed that we would use that $175,000 deficit allowance. And I wanted to have a discussion with them about whether or not we wanted to propose that, because that has the impact of affecting free cash. So if we're essentially using everything that we had left over in fiscal 18 to cover these deficits, which is perfectly fine, and I think the best way to handle it, but it means that we're not really adding much of anything to free cash. And because we are below the 10%, I think we're probably at 9%. I just wanted to bring some visibility to
Well, but that has important implications for the way the Finance Committee has historically set their guidelines, because in previous years, I mean, it's been sort of an automatic $1 million transfer from free cash, but we've been historically putting in
Right.
$1 million or more.
Yeah.
But this year's transfer, if the Finance Committee recommends that, will actually deplete our free cash then, is the bottom line.
It will, I think we probably will be at about the same point that we were a year ago. But we've spent a lot in free cash through different appropriations.
I know about the particular spending the town has authorized, but every year about $1 million has been added to free cash.
Yeah.
Net of everything, which the Finance Committee then uses as a way to reduce the property tax burden going forward. And that's not going to be here this year. They could still recommend $1 million transfer, but it will reduce the free cash balance before the town decides that they might want to use additional free cash for whatever.
Yeah, and I can tell you, we are still planning on $1 million in fiscal 20. We're still working our free cash calculation, but it will definitely mean we're not going to be over 10% free cash. We're not going to be looking for ways to expend that.
The Finance Committee voted to recommend this program of, that you've outlined, the spend transfer.
They did,
Yeah.
including the full snow and ice deficit.
So I have a question. You know, Carrie, you did a good job, or I don't know if it was in the memo to the Finance Committee or to us, explaining about the group insurance deficit and why that occurred in the first place and how you seek to avoid that going forward.
Yeah.
You had a recommendation in there about the OPEB trust fund and the chapter 32B, section 20. Didn't you about?
That's the next item.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Do we need to vote on this then? We're ready?
All right. I move to approve the FY18 budget transfers as set forth in the memo from the Finance Director dated October 1, 2018.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And now we are,
OPEB.
yep.
So this really is just to let you know about a potential warrant article for the 2019 annual town meeting. Back in 2008, the town adopted or petitioned the legislature to adopt a special act allowing for the creation of an OPEB trust fund. In 2016, state law was amended, and there is a question about whether or not our trust fund legislation special act meets current requirements. I have had a conversation with town council, with our audit firm, and town council has suggested that we consider adopting Mass General Law, Chapter 32B, Section 20, and the auditor, interestingly enough, feels that we're okay. So I think what I would like to do is just have town council look at this a little further. I think we probably will want to go forward and adopt this particular law so that there's no question about the status of the trust fund. So the concern is that if the trust fund legislation does not meet the new GASB 75 requirements, there's a potential concern that from an accounting perspective, the assets in the trust fund can't be counted against the liability. And so we want to make sure that that we're able to do that. So under previous GASB standards, it wasn't an issue, but because of the change in the law and the new GASB, there's a concern that that might not happen.
Will you bring this matter before the Financial Audit Advisory Committee?
Yeah, we certainly can
I think I
talk
would
about
suggest
that.
we do that, and they might be able to have an opinion to bring to the select board. If in fact you decide to go
Yeah.
ahead with that.
So I think we'll probably just have another conversation with town council to confirm this is what we should do, and then we can bring it to the Audit Advisory Committee. The second issue is, under this particular section of Mass General Law, it specifies who is, or you need to specify a trustee or board of trustees. And the options available under Section 20 are to have a single trustee who is the treasurer, to have the retirement board serve as the board of trustees for the OPEB trust fund, or to create a new committee. I mentioned in my memo, I don't think it makes sense to be considering the retirement board because this is not an asset of the retirement board. The retirement board has enough assets to manage. So I think we should be looking at either maintaining our current structure, which is a single trustee, or a new committee. And there isn't a lot of activity with this, and I know we have a lot of committees. So if we had a committee, at most, it would be, 2 meetings a year. There just isn't a lot of activity. We make an annual appropriation, we take the full amount of that appropriation, we move it into the trust fund. We don't have an agreement with the trustee between the select board, the town manager, and the trustee, which would be me as the treasurer. And I have noticed that other communities do have a very detailed agreement between the town and the trustee. And I think that's something that we need to do.
idea.
The second thing that we need to do is have an investment policy that is related to this particular trust fund. So those are the things that I would
Something we
recommend.
could ask the trustees of town donations for an opinion about. I mean, I know that they deal with donations, so
Yeah.
it's not the same thing. This OPEB is certainly not a donation, but there's some pretty smart.
I think they would provide some good advice on how to invest. We also could work with a separate investment advisor, and I think I mentioned that the retirement board just went through a process to hire its first investment advisor. We went through a formal request for proposals process, and the particular investment advisor or the firm that we chose, they also work with towns and OPEB trust funds. And I had a preliminary conversation with our representative, and for a very modest fee, he would be willing to add this on as well.
I think just for the record, I should point out that the OPEB means Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund.
Yeah, I
The
think we just
initials
take for
always threw me,
granted.
so,
Yeah.
just so that people understand what we're talking about here, so.
What kind of money are we talking about that's in the trust, the OPEB, that would be managed?
So there's about $18 million, including the current year's.
And is this also going to affect the regional district?
No.
No.
The regional
I mean, ours is
district.
separate, right? But is their
Oh, is
trust
this-
fund also going to need some potential change to be in compliance with the new law?
Well, it's my understanding that they just recently adopted a trust fund, since I've been here,
Just
so,
last year,
so,
2 years ago.
yeah, I think they would have adopted it under
Under
the new law.
statute.
I don't think this does require any action at this point. This is more of an informative and,
Yes.
But when it comes to it, will we get a formal recommendation from you as to how you believe we should proceed with respect to a formal agreement, or whether we should construct a committee? And
I will definitely write something up. I'm not sure I would provide an opinion on whether it was a single trustee or a committee. I could give you information about that, but
other people do it and the like.
Yeah.
And then asking the audit committee and the trustees of town donation for their input.
Yep.
I mean, it would be interesting to hear what they had to say about it.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
now ready, a request to install paddle access signs on town property.
Looks like Delia is not here. She's initiated the request, Delia Kay, the Director of Natural Resources, and she's created 2 new canoe launch areas, one on Pine Street and one on Baker Avenue, although she's actually requesting to install signs also at Dino's. It's an existing parking
Right.
area, but and then at Lowell Road, which is also existing. So there's 2 new and 2 existing locations where she requests the board approval to install signs in the right-of-way, advising the public that these canoe launches are there.
She sent a letter to the board dated September 19th, and there was a photograph of both the sign and the locations. So that I think that was helpful, and I don't know whether anybody has questions we need to defer, or whether we're ready to just go forward on it.
I was just curious as to whether or not we have signs at all the other launches in town.
And on top of that, I'd like to figure out whether there are already signs at these locations for the wild and scenic rivers. So are we stacking signs at this point? I don't know.
I'm fairly positive that Pine Street does have a wild and scenic with the bridge.
Yep.
but it would not, it's not, I don't believe it's at the same place that you would put a sign for the canoe access, because they're,
The river signs are at bridge crossings.
at bridge crossings.
So Lowell Road at Monument
Right.
Street.
So Lowell Road, there's a bridge crossing, and it's also a launch, a boat launch.
Yeah.
So we put 2 signs there? Wild and Scenic River and a boat launch? That's, I'm just wondering how many signs you put at
I mean,
Yeah.
these signs
That's a good
in,
question, because I can think of one boat launch in West Concord that there's no sign there currently.
I mean, I think,
Aware of at least one.
yeah, in West Concord, it's probably going to be news to many that there's any point of boat launch, much less where that these 4 would be, well, 3 in West Concord.
Oh, Pine Street's the new one.
Yep,
Right.
Dino's has been there, but nobody knows about it. And 36 Baker Avenue, or A, that's new as well. So,
My understanding was that there's one at West Vale, an opportunity, and that's not marked.
Are there no signs?
no, there are no signs. That is a very well-kept, quiet.
Yeah, so that was
I don't
what
think there is,
that was
I don't think we need a sign on Lowell Road. I think
Well, so
people,
that's my question.
So you
People
could,
know
you
that.
could hold off on that to seek more information on whether there's already enough signs, and it is widely known that that's a launching area. And while at the same time asking that question about the South Meadow place.
Because
where
I think when
there's
we-
at least one space reserved, but there's no sign telling.
What, you mean in West Vale
That's what-
apartment?
Excuse me. So
No, in fact, I still don't know exactly where that one parking space would be.
they have a garden there just as you
I-
turn into the.
I'm just saying
It's not marked, just like the Dino's, that was a condition
Oh,
of
yeah,
approval of the construction project, and
Yeah.
but there's no notice to the public about that.
I remember when we approved the river signs, there was a good discussion and worrying about proliferating signs and concern that all of a sudden we had signs.
These signs, I find, though, are quite different in that they don't have writing on them, it's just a symbol. And they're quite attractive, I think. I don't find they're clutter the same way something that has a lot of verbiage on it.
Well, I'm not necessarily opposed to this in the sense that I think a lot of people might be nervous about parking and putting in because there is no indication that it's actually allowed.
But there is an indication on Lowell Road, because it's fully lined up.
Well,
with
that's a
cars
very,
and
that's a
boats.
different, that's the one sort of odd man out on this list.
Just want to make sure we're being thoughtful
Maybe we could
about-
postpone and have Delia come talk to us.
Okay.
I wouldn't be opposed to it, I just want to make sure
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not looking like, a town
Is
of
it-
lovely billboards.
Yeah.
You're saying
lining
that
up.
you're receptive to the 3 new locations, but question the Lowell Road, and maybe even some other locations, why are we posting
Yeah,
here and not
West
in
Down.
some other locations? That just, okay, so I'll ask her to come in next time.
Now, review and update APP number 43, the naming of town property. And this came about in part because we've had a couple of requests in regards to installing benches, which is item 13. I think this has been sent to everybody, and I don't know if you have comments or questions or ready to approve it.
I think it's-
Anybody else have questions? or thoughts
I was
about
just wondering what I wasn't sure I had a clear recommendation from Delia about how she viewed this.
I think she's okay with the proposed, there is a proposed bench with a
Right.
plaque proposed at Egg Rock on conservation land. I think she's generally supportive. It's a way for providing facilities like that, benches for the public's use. So her indication is that she's supportive of it.
I'm going to be coming back to the board sometime after I've had a chance to talk with Marcia about potential benches. Some might be on the church property over here, so that when there's a bus drop-off area, there'd be some places for folks to sit that are a little bit more comfortable in those concrete slabs. And then back in the 2 new bus spots over in the Kai's Road lot to see if we could get some
seating
benches.
Yep.
Well, I know in the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, on the Acton side, there are a number of places where there are benches there. And I regularly see people taking advantage of it when they need to take a break. And it's a lovely, both as a memorial, but also as just a place to stop.
I often see mothers with their kids having a snack on one of the
Yeah.
benches. It's one of my favorite trails to bike. I know it's yours.
Are we ready to then approve this? People?
So we're approving the APP 43?
Yes,
As amended.
number
As amended, so.
12.
I move to approve APP 43 as drafted and amended October 12th, 2018.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then number 13 is a request to install a memorial bench on town property, Mark and Christy Riddick. They here to speak on this? Very good.
Sure, absolutely. Mark
you for
and
coming.
Christy Riddick, 478 Lexington Road. So what we're proposing is a donation of a memorial bench for our late son Spencer Riddick out in the Egg Rock area. It was an area that he actually enjoyed a great deal through taking the course at Rivers and Revolutions at the high school. So, but what we'd like to do is put something in that fits the environment there. We are going with we're suggesting a what's known as an old New England granite bench.
Provided a photograph
Yes.
to us, so
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And it's really a wonderful spot out there, and there's actually no place to sit unless you want to sit on the Egg Rock, so. Thought it might serve a purpose.
I personally think it would be fantastic.
Yeah. No,
I think it's wonderful.
Very pretty area and,
Better remember your son too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect spot to sit.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Is there well, I think it's a great idea, but is there a process for, I just think back to, it's got nothing to do with benches, but when we were dealing with renovations over here on, over by the Bell and stuff, is there any kind of process for approving stuff like that that's done outside of the select board doing what we're doing here? Does it need to go to planning or
Well, in that particular
NRC?
case, that was approved by the historic district because of
Right.
its location in the historic district. But the board did discuss that and approve the
Yeah,
plans.
no, I'm just
so-
wondering, does it need NRC blessing?
At the Egg Rock, in Egg Rock, yes, it's conservation land, so they'd have to approve it. My understanding is they're supportive.
Delia actually walked it.
Yep.
But have they approved it?
I don't know the answer to that. Has the Natural Resources Commission formally authorized the installation of the bench on that property at that site?
Because I don't think we should act until, because NRC has to approve it.
Does the NRC have to approve it, or can Delia approve it? I'm thinking
That's what
about
I'm
the bench
wondering.
that went in at
I don't know what the
Fairyland.
rules are, but
Right.
that's just the question I'm asking. Is
I know it
re-
hasn't come up in discussions at the NRC yet, but that doesn't mean that Delia doesn't have the authority. I just don't
And I
know.
don't know if she administratively, I think she has a lot of administrative authority to do something like this, alert the commission that she's planning to do it, so they have an opportunity to comment.
But why don't we go ahead, I mean, assuming the board's, but why don't we go ahead on the presumption that Delia has the
She knows what she's doing.
authority without going to the NRC?
Yeah,
I don't
mean, that's
recall the
why I
select
asked-
board
yeah,
having to
that's
vote
why I asked that
on
question.
the bench at Fairyland. There's an individual who built from a downed tree, built a bench. at
And that's
Fairyland by the
conservation.
pond. So,
So I would recommend that the board approve this, subject to confirmation that the Natural Resources Commission is comfortable with it.
okay.
I think it's, the location was on a map that was provided to us, so that would be what we're voting.
Well, and if you've walked that with Delia and it's, and it's the site
It's a great
that
spot.
She
would
gave us
really
her-
memorialize Spencer,
Bob
that's,
Hale was with us as well, Bob Hale, and he'll be installing it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's got
perfect
no
location.
objection, just making sure we do it right, so we
Correct,
don't have to
yeah.
go do it again.
Yeah. Okay. So are we ready for motion?
Yes.
So I move to approve the request to install the memorial bench on town property dated August 21, 18, with the proviso that the Natural Resources Commission has no problems with that.
Second.
Say in accordance with the documents we've been provided as well, so.
Okay. As amended.
We have a second to the amendment. Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So we should get an approval letter, we should go back to Delia and get an approval letter and send it?
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
Would you like-
That would be fine.
Sure.
Great.
Or just have, I don't think you even need a letter. I think if you just would
confirm
call
that
Right.
Okay,
the town manager and say it's.
We're good,
Done.
right.
got it.
Great,
Yeah.
thank
Your
you.
letter
Thank you.
is nice.
That's a wonderful way to remember your family.
Public-private partnership.
Well, I did review the documents, the recommendations, and the current list of public-private partnerships that I think we've sent around, but I asked Andrew who created that list of, and Andrew wasn't sure.
I believe
It was the committee?
committee,
Okay.
Committee.
So I was going to suggest for the board's discussion at your next meeting, perhaps, that we talked about perhaps having a small committee. And I wonder if 2 members of the board and the town manager might serve as a small group to evaluate. For example, there's some things that were labeled as public-private partnerships that I don't think are. And there's other things that I think are public-private partnerships. So my suggestion might be that the couple board members and I work together to develop this list of existing partnerships, and then have a process for identifying any new partnerships. Some have gone out. For example, the Visitor Center was a partnership between the Chamber of Commerce and the town. The Chamber of Commerce is now out. And the Beatty Center was on that list, and originally the building of the Beatty Center was a public-private partnership, but once the gift was made, now it's part of the town. So my suggestion, that's a proposal, I don't know if the board's willing to do that, so that we could really get into the definition that's provided by the committee isn't quite as precise as I would find helpful, so maybe we could get into it a little bit more, and I do think there's some opportunities to perhaps have on an ongoing basis the larger projects. The report identified $150,000, something larger than that would be significant, and perhaps we should have a committee. We talked amongst ourselves about having a committee to monitor those very large projects, and that might be something that we could also talk about. So what I meant, I see this as a public committee that posts its meetings, keeps records of its discussions, a forum for the public, if the public wants to come in and have a conversation about these public-private partnerships that they've heard about or had questions about. That committee, the subcommittee of the board, plus the town manager, could answer those questions and would provide the forum that's been
And
proposed
this
in the
would be
report.
a committee that it was somewhat limited in the extent of the time. It would get up and running and kind of set the parameters rather than being an ongoing year after year.
Right. And then you may decide that in the future to delegate it to other
Right.
people. But I would find it helpful if together in the next 6 months, we come up with a way to set this up, to structure it. And then you may want to spin it off to, another small group. Does that sound reasonable? So I'll come up with a charge of duties for this small group that you take a look at next time, if that's agreeable.
Great.
Great.
I think that's a good idea. Would you want to consider inviting someone who was on the original committee to be a third person on this? Would that be useful? Or you want to start where they left off and?
It has to do with relationships. Like we have some important relationships in the
Right.
in the nonprofit sector, particularly, and I think it's about managing those relationships. So, one of my concerns is to not make the relationship so bureaucratic that the garden club says we don't want to plant the petunias out front anymore, or whatever, because we've got to fill out these forms or something like that. So I would request that we have that conversation about how things work.
Yeah, if we decide later on that there needs to be like a committee that annually reviews these kind of things, we could expand
Yeah, okay.
membership there.
That's good. Okay.
Now, there are a couple of members of the disbanded committee. I don't know whether, Jean, if you were the chair, if you have any comments you'd like to make, or? Don't feel you have to, but.
Yeah, no.
Jean Goldsberry, 1832 Main Street. I guess just to remind whatever members of this committee that the larger Public-Private Partnership Study Committee took a considerable amount of time in developing the definition of what a public-private partnership is. And we did our best to come up with what we thought were reasonable public-private partnerships. And certainly it couldn't be completely exhaustive, but we worked pretty hard on that. So I just would caution very much tweaking of that definition in particular, because there was a lot of work that was done in order to sort of put our arms around what exactly are we talking about and provide that to the town to be able to make some decisions going forward. I think that there are still members or former members of the former committee who would be interested in potentially assisting in terms of reviewing membership. There were members of the committee who are part of the nonprofit world and certainly understand the challenges and the importance of keeping those relationships strong between those entities and the town. And there were many of those entities on the list. So just a thought of caution.
Point taken.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Anybody else want to make a comment, or where? I think we don't have to make a motion on that. We can just proceed with that, and we can talk about.
But I hope we can get that charge done so we can do it.
Yep, I don't think it will take long at all, and we can, and it makes some sense to have an initial meeting. We have a major project that's, being under consideration and development. It might be an opportunity for that committee or some follow-on committee to manage that large project.
Okay, the next is discussing the next steps for the 2030 long-range plan. We had a brief discussion at the last meeting, but you were not here, so I thought it was important that we all have input on that, and whether, Jane, you were the liaison,
Right.
whether this be sort of what the nature of this progress should be and how we could move forward. So I'll turn it.
Well, I'm glad that we've got this on the docket here, and as I was gratefully reminded, we have disbanded the committee, but we're looking at having a longer conversation about this. And, I assume that's what an opportunity to tee up tonight, thinking about spending, I think it was actually Mike who wisely suggested a more roll up our sleeves, in-depth conversation about next steps. I remember the first long-range plan I had any interaction with was our previous one, when Marcia would come in and update us every year on the progress, and the things that we'd accomplished, and the things that no longer were on a list because we'd sort of gone beyond. Having been in the middle of this process, Envision Concord 2030 is a very different animal than it's not a checklist. And somehow we're going to have to embed the goals in an annual review process of what that, working with Marcia and working with actually more of the committees, because while it may come through Marcia, the sustainable principles that we used from the American Planning Association were more of a horizontal look, so that any one action might actually tie together actions at a number of different town departments. So it's it's not just a list of things to do.
I know the planning board has come up with kind of a set of priorities,
Right.
which I think is a pretty good starting point.
Right.
But I think it's a starting point that we
Right.
may need to add on or have some different suggestions.
Right.
In that vein, I commented some time ago that it might be helpful to know which of the committees and commissions have already identified specific action steps or goals that they're working on for FY19, just as a way to inform us in our conversation about how we proceed or think about it. You know, I'm aware of some of the ones that were on the planning board as well, but I'm not aware of some of the other committees and what they're looking at.
And I think that the challenge is going to be to make sure that when we, because I think that's a great way to pull the threads together, but also to show how they connect.
Right.
Because one of the pieces that I'm not sure will jump off the page as easily is where the efficiencies are. Because, you know, some of the ways we're going to be able to really demonstrate the value of this planning process are the ways that in action items that come through different committees versus having been standalone objectives. It was certainly long discussed that there should be, that it would be the hope that there are, you know, direct efficiencies and financial efficiencies and a whole host of other benefits to the town over time because of this process.
And cross-department collaboration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there, what we're talking about, it sounds like, is how do you measure things that are soft?
Right.
How do you measure improved quality of life? How do you improve? How do you assess or measure livability?
Right.
And so these are difficult concepts, and you know it's subjective to what projects the town invests in that may or may not achieve a livability index.
Right.
Or a walkability index, or transportation. Well, having 5 bikes on, you know, in a bike share program meet that objective, you know. So it's difficult because I think it was easier with a to-do list to measure success because you were able to build and see what you've done. And that was easily measured. But when you think about conceptual concepts of, you know.
I think also, though, the plan kind of called for collaboration with different towns and communities around, and we have now likely will have, well, we definitely will have a new state representative, and there may be some state actions that we can provide information or needs to the new state representative that might be useful.
What concerns me about it is, I mean, all of that's, I think, important what you've said, but what concerns me about it is that if there isn't a broad direction that is laid out, I know because we have so many active citizens and great town departments, the various departments will look at it, they'll define what they think is really cool to do, and away they go. And it's not good or bad, I have no opinion about that, but somehow we need to have it not be a top-down, we don't want the select board going, here's the 5 things you should do, but you don't want to have every department in town deciding what's the right thing to do and running off. So for me, the question is, how do we have some kind of forum or some kind of discussion with us, with maybe the senior leadership of the town to talk and hear about what they think is appropriate, and for us to see if we can, you know, get it corralled a little bit and make a little bit of sense of it. Because I think that all the effort that's gone into it, you don't want it dissipated, but we don't want to have ourselves pulled in too many different directions. All of the things that were in that plan, many of them anyway, cost resources to do. And so we need to be thoughtful and careful about that and try to figure out where the efficiencies are, where the big successes can be, what we can and can't measure. So my hope is that we somehow figure out how to get folks together to have more conversations about what they think are the important things in their domain to do, and see if we can get them organized a little bit, in a way that would say, well, here's the example. It's a much smaller project, so it's not a great example, but the Town Governance Committee, you know, had a lot of recommendations. But what we were able to do is go through it, I don't remember exactly how we did it, but we went through it and we identified 5 or 6 things that we thought were really the most important things to work on. And then we launched those. And then as we've been successful with them, well, we picked up another item and pick up another item. So that's my concern, is that I don't want to, it's just preposterous for us to sit here and say, well,
That's it.
this is the way. But it's also, dangerous, I think, to just have everybody decide for themselves in a departmental sense that that's the road to take, so let's go. Because then we'll just have conflicts that'll be very hard to resolve.
Well, I think to Alice's point, I think one of the onuses may be on us is to build some kind of scoring matrix so that we can somehow evaluate different ideas against themselves. Because I was also imagining the CPC process of ranking, I know the CPC gets many, 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 all wonderful proposals, but there's an evaluation criteria. And then there's a public process of really trying to figure out which ones are the priorities. I don't, the Envision Concord didn't come out, it didn't finish with and now this is how you take it, you own it, and deliver it back. And I think your cautions are really
Well, and there's
wise.
also, in addition to departments, there are constituencies for which there isn't a department.
Right, that's right.
All of the intangibles that you mentioned, who's that? The business community, we don't have an economic development department in town, or tourism department.
Yep.
Transportation.
Transportation department. So we've got our departments and they do their work, but.
And to the point of funding, some of these, I'm imagining some of the things that would come forward would be points of commitment that are somewhere in line, would be in line with the next 10 years of work by any one of our town departments. And some of them may be opportunistic, as in, we can do this right now, and some may also be, there's funding for it separately. And, those are all the, as you said, the intangibles. We don't know until we sort of challenge ourselves to ask those questions when we start to try and figure out how do we,
So I wonder if a starting point is, work with the committees that do set annual goals.
Yep.
And to see if we can develop the construct that measures them, puts them in the buckets. I mean, we already approved to participate in the Complete Streets program. So that was something that was in the long-range plan. It was something in the CPW's bailiwick. So you take that and where does that fit? Well, livability, transportation, walkability. So we can kind of put it in a concept area and say we're making progress, but we can't measure whether people are happier with it. We don't know if it meets the intended outcome. Sounds like a great idea.
is it indeed taking cars off the road? Is it putting more?
So the only way to know that is to do how many cars are on the road today with this population level, and have we taken, are more bikes on the road than there were yesterday? Well, you have to know what you had yesterday.
Right.
And if that's not on somebody's, unless we don't care about measuring.
Well, and along the lines of measuring, we have a number of sustainability initiatives in other committees intended to meet state goals as well as the critically important goals that Concord's already set for itself in terms of our carbon footprint.
But that we can measure that because we have a baseline. We have an inventory that was done, one in 2015, then 2018, and one before that. So there are benchmarks for that one, but there may not be
For some of these others.
for some of these other ones.
What the next step then should be to try to reach out to the different committees, or, what do you envision as
How do you
the
get
board's
town
next
goals?
step?
How do you get the goals from the committees?
It starts with this board, and then
We did ours for this year.
and then the departments do those based on you. I set my goals after that, and then the departments set their goals after that. Committees, I think it's sort of self-started. They, the planning board set their own goals on zoning bylaw amendments they wanted. So it is, for departments, it's supposed to start with you.
But for me, the kinds of things that we should be concerned about are the broad issues. The broad issues that cut across a bunch of initiatives. So take Jane's point about an opportunistic one. Okay, everybody gets that.
Right.
But if we have a broad goal of, let's just say, diversity, I don't want to try to figure out what that means right now, but diversity on all its dimensions, we might not want an opportunistic thing done. So I think if we were gonna do anything, it would be setting these broad goals to which the rest of the departments might react, especially those that cut across a lot of different, and diversity is the one that just comes to my mind as cutting across virtually every department that we can probably think about. But I think that's something we could do, is we could wrestle 3 or 4 or 5, I don't know how many, broad themes that we thought were the core of what the long-range plan was about. And they give us a lot of evidence in there too, as a way to sort of charge the various departments and even some town committees to come back with some ideas and proposals that would advance these. And then again, our job would be to try to, minimize the conflict and maximize the efficiencies by putting some of them together from various places, or tell committee B, yeah, I don't think so. So that's what I think a select board should do, is say, here are the 4 or 5 broad themes that the town's long-range plan has articulated. And we would hope people would respond, the committees and departments would respond to that by coming back with, and we might have some of our own initiatives within there. So, but to me, I think coming up with those broad themes, we've all read the plan, we've studied it. Jane has gone to numerous meetings, she probably knows more about it than anybody, but it's the kind of plan that benefits from discussion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would love to have, to your point, I'd like to challenge the town departments and the committees to think hard and then nominate. I mean, I'd want to ask those who spend a lot of time thinking about specific areas to think, about the projects or the initiatives that that sort of check off the most. If let's say we produced, there are many sweeping goals already in, this is not something we're creating out of whole cloth.
Right.
But let's say we set 5 of these as you've said, as the select board's nominated core goals. It'd be interesting to see what came back.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's the process that we do now. It's just that we haven't done it under the rubric of the new design of the comprehensive long-range plan. We set goals.
Mm-hmm.
The town manager then looks at the goals and sets his goals in conformity with that. And I know from watching the planning board and other boards, they'd like to see what the big goals are and see what they can do to contribute to them. So that's the process we currently do.
But what I'm unclear about is how do we have the rich kind of discussion that will, I'll just make it personal, will make me feel as if I've read the report, I've studied the report, I've heard this point of view and that point of view, and okay, I'm kind of settled in on this. I've read it, I've got my opinions. I talked to Jane a couple times about it, so I know a few things she might think about. And,
Does it
So
make sense,
I
Jane?
see-
I'm sorry.
I see the value in looking at some broader goals. One of the things that concerns me right now is that the select board, as you said, has their goals. The town managers supported those. A couple of the committees that I am aware of that are already incorporating some points that relate to the long-range plan have picked off very specific things, which don't always address looking at the whole as the long-range plan was trying to envision. So I wonder if the challenge to each of the departments is to identify a project or a project direction that they're ready to move on that also involves other departments and cuts across something they want to get accomplished that isn't just self-contained.
That's what I mean by how do we score this? One of the points, or when we're talking about how does something approach diversity, if that was one of, we'd want to see how many different opportunities to tackle that question. That seems to me something that would come from every department. So, but.
And I
I'm
just don't,
wondering, just so we move along to the next steps, whether, I know, Mike, you and Alice are gonna be somewhat tied up with the search for the new town manager, whether Jane is something that you would wanna take sort of the lead on.
Sure.
And, perhaps even work with Linda in terms of putting the thoughts together, and then come back to the board, and we can see where we go from there.
well, can I make a specific suggestion? I would appreciate it sometime, maybe it's a Saturday, I don't know when it is, but we would have a meeting of the board, public meeting, but the only thing we're gonna talk about is the long-range plan. And we're gonna do it Saturday morning from 9 to 11. Anybody who wants to come can come, but it isn't to get input from the public. It's giving us a chance to discuss
The working session.
Work session.
openly, because we can't do it privately.
Right.
So I would just like
Good idea.
a couple of 2 or 3 hours to be able to sit down with town manager and you
Right in
guys
front of us.
Yeah.
You know, with Marcia maybe.
hear what's going on. Maybe Marcia, sure.
Delia.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily, it'd be useful to bring in staff, but I'm always a little conscious of weekend time. Maybe if Andrew came up, maybe Linda and I could propose an agenda for that working
That'd be
session
great.
as our first
That'd be great.
foray into this. If
I
Andrew
think
can
Marcia
come.
should be there. I mean, it happened
We don't have to
under,
do it Saturday, we can do it on Friday.
yeah, we can do it whenever people can do it.
Yeah.
I'm just.
I mean,
Yeah, no, I think
I just picked a day, but it could be a
Yeah.
weekday.
I think then if we had that 2 or 3 hour discussion, we might be prepared then to try to get our thoughts on paper and start seeing if we can get them coalesced around some broad thematics that we could then kind of roll out, get public input, get department input.
Well, it's also the sort of thing that once that happens, then Tom can start to populate this at the chair's breakfast. I mean,
Right,
we can
yeah.
start to disseminate
Plant the
this.
seed and get going.
Yep.
So you guys will try to, great, that'd be terrific.
And so Andrew, you'll get us some possible dates. Great.
Item number 16 is follow-up on special town meeting actions. We have one item that we're looking into is the issue of whether we need to post the warrants in each of the precincts, or do we need a bylaw? That got us into a little bit of a snag this year. It seems to me to be kind of a unnecessary process that really is not beneficial to anybody. And probably if we can get a bylaw to avoid that, to change it, then we're better off for it.
Is that common? I mean, do other towns avoid posting warrants in all the different precincts?
It's many do post it, but many do not.
Okay.
It probably is worthy of. Nobody goes to the voting precincts locations to check on what's on the warrant.
I was going to say,
they would
that
typically
seems
come
like
to this
you go there to
building
vote.
or go online.
And
So
they get away with that just by passing a bylaw?
you have to have the state law requires you to have a bylaw to determine how you will inform the voters, but you don't have to.
Sounds pretty easy, we ought to do
Yeah,
it. I mean,
exactly.
It sounds like this is a vestige of an
So-
old law from an
Absolutely.
old time, before there was social media.
So
the
we have a
internet, and
bylaw that requires this particular format. It does seem like it should.
Well, this
be.
will
This
just
is
be
an
a warrant
efficiency, I think,
article
that
on
would be in
the
line with
town
all of our
website.
objectives and goals.
I think we need to just make sure with town council that all we need is the bylaw, but I think that that's something, I've talked to Carmen about it, and she's in favor.
And we have posted it in the past?
Yes.
That's why we signed 5
No, I
copies all
remember
the
we
time.
signed them all, but I didn't know that's what you did with
I
them.
think they were up on the door.
And guess what, Mike? Nobody else does either.
Well, you see them on the door when you go in to vote.
Right, but that's
Thought they were
somewhat too
just
late.
that day. Oh, well.
As I stated, we've already followed up on Article 2 of the special town meeting with the eminent domain settlement when we had the meeting on the 10th. I think we do need to probably, at some point, make sure we get the White Pond follow-up on that in terms of.
I have a meeting tomorrow with the chair of the associates and Kevin Hurley. And they've already been in discussion with the natural resources about the conservation land. So we're moving forward
Moving
with
on that. Other than that, I think I'm not sure, the stage of the police department, have they?
He's designated a new school resource officer, Kevin Gina, did you?
That
you saw
happened fast.
So that did happen quickly.
He's on staff.
Yeah, it was an existing police officer, and then we'll backfill for Kevin's position.
I know the school committee was, and the superintendent was very appreciative of that action. And I assume that the state grant for the $3,200 will get transferred as soon as
Our
possible.
massive
available.
fund.
We're all set. The Blackbird issue.
Nothing to follow up on there.
That's easy
And Marcia
enough.
is following up on the grant of easements, which will be very simple. She just learned that the state Department of Corrections has the responsibility for all of the easements, including the state police. So it'll be a simple process.
Any other comments or anything other steps we need to do for follow up on special town meeting?
I think so.
I didn't see any, so we now discuss the town manager search committee. Provided a list of 9 names, and I think unless we've numbered them if we have to have discussion, but otherwise I can read them out and we can, as I understand, we can nominate them tonight, Andrew?
Would there be a problem with doing that?
No, you can nominate.
Yeah.
You're taking no action, so it's
Yeah.
okay, and then appointment will be on in 2 weeks,
I don't know if anybody has
if you're
any
ready.
questions or comments.
We are thankful for people who
Yes.
sent in their green cards. We had a lot of interest.
No, there was, and then a lot of people, the business community, other committees sent in suggestions of people, and as I say, it was, the difficulty was not selecting a committee of 25 or even 50, because we have extraordinary number of very dedicated citizens who are willing and have a lot of experience and would be very helpful. Should I just read out the names and addresses then? Or do you want to, you're
So,
nominating?
So if we're ready to nominate, I'll nominate with addresses. Okay,
don't we?
so,
All set with that, everybody?
so I nominate the following citizens as for membership to the Town Manager Search Committee. Let's see. And I should mention that these are people that come from different parts of town, from West Concord, from Concord Center. Some are older, some are younger, trying to get a variety of thought from all the applications and all the green cards we got. So here are the names. Nominate Peggy Briggs at 253 Elm Street, Jeffrey Collins, 55 Highland Street, Bouja Cookman, 94 Hubbard Street, Jim DiGiovanni, I always say his name wrong, Jim DiGiovanni, close enough, 269 Lawsbrook Road, sorry Jim. Pauline Reeve, 429 Williams Road, Steve Verrill, 415 Plainfield Road, Dina Whitfield, 67 Wits End Road, and Mike Lawson of the Select Board, and me as of the Select Board representative on the committee.
Thank you. We, I guess, do not need a second or anything, but we will hopefully at the next meeting elect those. Review, approve to,
Excuse me, Tom.
Yep.
We would
the consultant?
attempt to accelerate this process.
Yeah.
We've now got the committee nominated, so 2 weeks from now, we'll be able to appoint a committee. And then it'll be another 2 weeks before we can get the committee together and get organized. So one of the things that we thought, Alice and I met with Amy Foley, the director of HR, and that the board would give up Alice and me the authority to develop a proposal to go out to a number of search committees that's been identified by HR, and we would go out with them, and we would be delegated the authority to select a search committee.
No, a firm
Yes,
to
a
conduct
firm,
the
a
search for
consulting
us.
firm.
But that recommendation, we wouldn't
Come
do the
back.
selection. We would find the firm that we feel is strongest to meet our needs, bring it back to the Select Board for approval.
and I think in our package, there was sort of the,
List of
yeah.
number of firms. It's about 5 firms, I think, that have been identified.
Yeah.
So that'd be a form of a motion that we,
So we do know that other towns have done it differently. Some have started a little earlier in the process and had this committee that we're putting together do this part of the work. But our concern was that by the time this committee gets to meet, we're getting close, the earliest they'd meet is November. They'd need at least one meeting to figure out what their job is, and they wouldn't be able to select the firm. We'd like to jumpstart that, get this firm starting to work for us, because we have a job description that we need to fill out completely. I know we do have the one that we approved here, that there's a lot to do before that committee is up and running, so let's jumpstart.
all of these search firms will, since many of them have been in the business of doing this, they would have a ready clientele that they could reach out to. So we'd want to be able to get advertising moving as quickly as we can. And again, we're going to get on the holiday period here and things get awful confusing. So that's the
No, I
hope
think
that
that
the
makes a lot of
board-
sense.
And a number of our neighboring towns have done their selection in the last year or two, so we're hoping that there's still a very large pool of extremely well-qualified candidates to fill this position.
Well, I was just speaking to a member of the Acton, he's now in the Select Board, but he was a member of the search committee, and he was talking about the range that they pulled people from, which was really quite surprising.
Range meaning geographically?
Geographic
They had
range.
something like 50 applications, and they
Uh-oh.
very quickly pared it down to 17, because they said that they would just get managers of McDonald's who applied just because they saw it was a management position, and that there weren't an overwhelming number of people who would be suitable, so that it's a manageable process.
Hopefully.
I know it's in good hands. But yes, I think then a motion to have Mike Lawson and Alice Kaufman work with Amy Foley to advertise and bring back to the committee the consultant for the selection process.
Recommendation.
Recommendation.
Yeah. To develop the RFP, right? To
Develop the RFP,
execute the
solicit.
RFP, yeah.
And again, there are examples of that, so
Yeah.
that I don't think it's going to be insurmountable.
And we will get help from Amy Foley,
Yeah, she's
who's
excellent.
experienced in this.
So do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now we have item 18, review approved 2018-2019 public ceremonies and celebration committee calendar of events. That's been provided to us all. Next one being Sunday, November 11th at 8 a.m., Veterans Day flag retirement at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. But there's a listing all the way through Memorial Day.
Let's hope Patriots Day
Is a little nicer.
is celebrated.
Yes.
I hope that November 11th is a nice day. That's often a
That's
tricky
a
one,
lovely,
too.
yeah.
It's
It
a
was-
great event.
It was last year, it was nippy, but it was lovely.
Yes.
I guess
I
we,
move to approve the Public Ceremonies and Celebrations Committee 2018-19 calendar of events as submitted.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Public comments.
We seem to have
think
lost
we've-
our public.
Board a good many of them. We've accomplished our
Oh,
purpose in that regard. Committee
Out.
committee liaison reports. Linda, do you want to begin?
I've been to almost every housing group meeting in the last month, let's say, in preparation for the special town meeting, so we know where we stand on that. I would point out that the Affordable Housing Funding Committee is on track to deliver a report and meet with the committee at the end of the month.
Next meeting.
Next meeting, right. And then I also went to a zoning meeting. It was short, very short agenda.
I attended the,
Oh, excuse me. Forgot to mention the zoning board is looking for one additional member. And so if anyone is interested, please get that in. They desperately need that position filled, also to meet quorum when they need it.
I attended the light plant, municipal light plant board meeting, long agenda as usual. A lot of good discussions about rate design. As Chris reported, they decided to postpone until at least after the first of the year, changing the three-tiered system. The large agenda item, at least in terms of the amount of time, was a funding balance review study presented to them, and went over the funding balance, so that was a very interesting discussion. I attended the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee. In addition to the normal business that they conducted, one of the things that has come up is a discussion about what residency requirement, if any, should the town have in terms of dispersing funds from the Hugh Cargill. They never had them in the past, but they've had a couple of incidents where I think they're still going to try to handle it on an exception basis. If it comes up, they'll talk about it. And then they gave a comprehensive report of the September 25th meeting of the trustees of town donations, who are reconsidering their policies about how funds can be distributed to the various committees. That was very good. And I'll put in a plug, same as Linda did. We made any progress on seating the Junction Village, I don't know what his full name is, but
Cultural Council?
no, the
Oh, the
advisory committee for the landscape and stuff like that.
Oh, do we have names? We had just one, okay.
Yeah, so
There are
we
some new
need,
green cards that might be relevant that came in.
so
I mean, do
anyway,
we want to have that come through the NRC's pool, or are we looking at,
They've been requested to come here.
yeah.
Right. No, I
But
understand. I'm just
they'll
trying to-
work with the Delia's, I
Right.
think, staff to the committee and
I'd just
Marcia.
like to get this, if we
Yeah,
can, get it
yeah.
going, so we can
yeah.
make sure we're out ahead of this process and don't get caught short. I think we still have time, but maybe
Well, I
I'll come
think
in
that
and
we can
look at.
talk to the West Concord Advisory Committee and, a number of the different
Yeah.
forums.
So that's it for me. We had a couple of meetings, Ag Committee meeting and the Pollinators Committee meeting were postponed.
Oh,
I attended the school committee, and there was letter read regarding Dr. Laurie Hunter's first year, congratulating her, and then there was a discussion also of the school committee 2018-19 goals and various budget discussions. So they have a lot on their plate, getting ready, in essence, I think, for town meeting, and wanting to make sure that they're working with the finance committee as well. That was the only committee that I met during my period of time.
I had a number of committee meetings, the Natural Resources Commission. I can't say it was wildly exciting, but headway in a number of different delineation points. I'd say the interesting conversation was both, in real time, seeing how the 50-foot setback is being applied. And, so much of what goes on at the NRC is education. Folks come in and they're not really sure what it is that they're, how to propose within that setback or others in the no-build zone. And I'm always impressed with the gentleness that's offered, especially when the news isn't necessarily positive. And then the Historic District Commission also met. And interestingly, again, very similar sort of feeling. I witnessed one gentleman who really, really, really wanted to have a chimney removed so that he could capitalize on some space and realign it in his, and they disagreed, and he had to leave without his construction plans possible. And again, it's always impressive to see hard decisions get offered and people accept them with grace. Cafe Nero was there to discuss the painting of their windows and the signs, and that is causing some debate. We'll see how they take the discussion of, I think the way the HGC was looking at it is by building, and because Cafe Nero spans two different buildings, they're looking to keep the colors in line with the rest of the individual building, which is going to be interesting for Nero, because that means that they're not going to have a consistent pattern necessarily.
The buildings are both brick?
No, but I'm talking about the colors of the insets of the windows or the sashes. If you've seen a Cafe Nero, they have a very distinct look. It's black, just as their sign is. And in one case, a building, all of the windows in this building are white on their sashes.
Cream colored, like
So-
the rest of the, around the whole, that whole block.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting. There was a really lengthy discussion on expanding the historic districts. What the HGC did, because this is something they're working towards, looking at a warrant article on for spring annual town meeting. They put out a proposal for an area that they're looking to expand a contiguous historic district. So they contacted all of the residents that would be affected. And I'm not sure how effective they felt that they did. They put out a survey and got, I think, 14% response. But this is a small area, and they want to make sure they get as close to 100% contact. So the next step they took on themselves as members was to divvy up all of the homes and make individual calls, and so that there was some sense of direct feedback loop. There was one person in the room who, had a lot of questions, but I suspect he is unusual. As was discussed, a paper survey walks in the door right now, and it doesn't necessarily make it past the recycling in, so. And I was just really impressed with the dedication that they've put to that. And there was continued discussion of the lighting schedule at our new supermarket and Trails End Cafe. And I think they're working through a process by which the lights will turn off. They're all on one circuit or one, so you can't turn off certain areas of the parking because, let's say, Trails End Cafe is open later than the market. They were all, it was initially an all-in, and so there was a discussion, and I think Mr. White wisely determined that he was gonna take, not challenge the timing right now. And then finally, I did meet with the West Concord Junction the West Concord Junction Cultural District. And they are going forward, as you said earlier, with the West Concord Day on the 20th. There's also going to be a lot of music at that as well. So that's going to be very lively. And they're putting together their a grant proposal, because this is one of the benefits of these two districts, is that they will be able to access funds put aside by the state for application. And they're moving ahead. They plan to have it, well, it's already gone out because the due date was October 8th, which brings me to the need to get their compatriots on this side of Route 2 going. But I also understand that they have, the cultural district here really does have a ongoing thought process, and they're looking at it as far more tourism-based and sort of economic stimulation in the district, which is very interesting because they really will have different flavors. And I did some other things, but that's more than enough for mine.
Well, I'll start the most recent and go back in time. So before this meeting, I was at the Minuteman High School School Building Committee meeting. We are on budget and on time. Although the project has got this slight delay because of the National Grid strike, the project is now being buttoned up for the winter so they can do continual working inside the building, but without the gas lines. It has caused the project to figure out alternative heating systems, so.
Is that diesel?
They're bringing in propane.
Oh, okay.
Because they need to be able to have it warm enough to be able to work through the winter. It's still on schedule to open in 2019.
And breathable.
And they received the National
Yeah.
Gold Ribbon or
Yeah.
Gold,
Yeah.
Award, which
For educational
one
excellence.
of 3 in the country, I
Yeah.
think it was. So that's fairly impressive.
So the question is, you want to take 1.5 minutes to see the latest video? Because I know you guys all walked through the property.
Yeah.
We're welcome to go one more time, but you can see how much progress has been made.
I'd love to
since we
see
were
it
there
again. I
last
haven't
fall.
been back.
So we can schedule that. There's going to be an open house in December. December.
Yep.
I forgot the date. Sometime early December. December 2nd, an open house, and we can go. But I thought, let's just take a minute to look at this video, give us a little break in chatter. Okay.
This is Comcast, not Verizon, right?
Ooh. Do you want me to read
There
the
we
next
go.
one? Or is- good.
Oh, this
Okay.
is the town.
So here's what it looks like today.
Wow.
Wow.
That's where it's gonna be when it's done. So this is sort of a progress report. Remember when we were there?
Mm-hmm.
That's the green roof. And they've been having trouble pouring concrete in the last several weeks because it's been cold and wet. So that's what the space will look like, and this is what it looks like now. They're putting in all the windows, doing the glazing.
A lot easier to walk around now.
Yeah, but you can
You gotta
see how
step
it's really
over.
taking shape to
Yeah.
where it was when we were there and where it's
Theater house. Oh, wow.
So you can see the shapes coming together.
Too bad we can't have town meeting
Look
there.
at that. Look how much work has gone on. So they'll have the skin entirely done before the real winter sets in and be able to work from the inside. There's one area that they're still doing work on, it's the cafeteria, the culinary arts program, where they're now putting in all of the underground utility lines that are needed to be able to support the culinary program.
Is that also going to be a natural gas hiccup?
I don't know, we didn't talk about that, but.
They're very wise to have ordered the steel early so that they were not subject to any of the tariffs. Which,
They were really lucky
yeah.
in that. There was audio to go with this.
Yeah, I just tried to turn down earlier so you could talk through it.
Okay.
That's a nice little video.
September 2019, this project will be done.
That's a nice video.
Yeah, it was great.
So let's see what else we did. A number of us attended this weekend's Wild and Scenic River celebration. It's the 50th anniversary of the federal law. At the event was Congresswoman Nikki Songus, who was recognized for her ongoing support for the rivers in our district. There are a number of new publications that are out, some success stories, a progress report on the comprehensive plan. And if you haven't taken any time to go out on these rivers, they're pretty remarkable to go kayaking or canoeing or walking along the river trails. It's a total respite from the world. It's
There was
magnificent.
a lot of people out as we were waiting and listening.
There were a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to mention anything in particular?
Well, I'm just, one of the things, there's a draft update report that was issued, and it's going to be, this is still in draft form. We'll see it in more finalized form soon. But there's a whole section on Concord on the things that we've accomplished, most of which I think I would have taken for granted because I didn't realize that these were, again, shared goals, but, renovations to the Kaiser Road Municipal Facility, renovation to the Millbrook Terry site, street parking, MCI Concord storm drain, Assabet River bridges, MBTA bridges, canoe and kayak access. But the interesting thing, of course, are where the challenges and opportunities still exist. And the first one is the Mass DOT storm drainage from the highways in the watershed remains. And I'm thinking immediately of the drain that we've identified coming off of Route 2 into the Giroux property. And I won't go through all of this, but this is worth looking through because both as a set of kudos to cooperation. In some respects, this is kind of a good example of something you might see reflective of the future long-range plan, because this is an independent outside body that's showing all the ways that things that we've done in Concord pull together their goals.
Well, it's not entirely outside. We've appointed 2 members to
Right.
the committee who have worked on developing the long-range plan.
Right,
for the
but I
Concord
mean,
rivers.
from a number of these things are initiatives of town departments. So, the fact that they also thread through greater goals, and it's just nice to see them presented that way.
So these documents are available
Yep.
here and online. I also attended the Historical Commission, and there are 2 interesting presentations. One was on a request to upgrade our public shade tree policy. There's concern that it doesn't allow actually for public shade trees because it doesn't support installing trees in the town right-of-way, but 20 feet back from the roadway. And so there's a presentation about how that actually doesn't provide shade for people walking their dogs or riding their bikes or strolling on their own in shade. And one example was Main Street. On Elm Street, where a lot of the old elms are gone and there's very little shade. And in that conversation was a discussion of whether we need a tree warden and whether our current staffing is inadequate to meet the need as well as the funding for public shade trees.
I've heard that echoed in a number of spaces.
There was also a presentation by Jack McBride and Alicia Boyajian on telecommunications and what do we need for cell towers and whether we could, the request was, can help them understand what is the role of 106 of the Historic Preservation Act for view shed preservation, and to know whether it was possible to review the Kaiser Road site again. I was also at the Light Board, no need to repeat it. Cemetery Committee, November 7th is the open meeting, public meeting on the vision for, they're calling it supply, but it's really options for burials and how much space is needed and do we need to grow to the new kinds of burial interests. So here's a
Sounds
public
like
input
a
session.
So they're
Further
not talking
discussion
about
of-
trying to increase the supply.
They are looking to increase the supply of places you can
Oh,
choose
okay.
to spend the rest of your life
I
in.
needed that clarification.
Is there
Thank
still,
you.
is the mausoleum conversation?
Yes, the mausoleum
thread through-
conversation will be part of this.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, I also attended CSAC. I could go on and on, but we have applied for a National Grid Community Partnership Grant that will help forward our greenhouse gas emissions goals, and I'm not exactly sure what the grant can do, but it's offering money to communities to help plan.
Great.
And we heard about the electric vehicle ride and drive. There were great, like 230 people came, 100 and some odd, 110 people took EVs out for test drives.
And many of them got to drive on the electric bus, because that was,
Which provided transport from
Transportation,
parking back to
exactly.
drive the electric vehicle.
Were they quiet?
It was,
On the
you know,
bus.
it's a
everything
very
was-
quiet ride comparatively.
It was so quiet that they had to have a number of volunteers helping direct people around the quiet vehicles, because if you're talking, you don't notice a vehicle
Is
in
moving.
the middle of a parking
Yeah.
lot looking at all these displays. So they had quite a crew of volunteers helping to make sure it was safe enough that people could know that there's an electric vehicle following them. And I attended the White Pond Advisory Committee, and they are going to be working on updating their pond vision, given the new design that the town will be operating the swimming beach. So they're updating what their vision document is that was online about what needed to be done and who should do it, to be looking at helping the town plan for things like how do we consider an algae growth, an algae bloom, or what do we think about how to manage the beach or the road coming down. So they're doing their job as the advisory committee, and it was a
And
good
while the
conversation.
vote at special town meeting was overwhelming to accept the gift, there were concerns raised about sort of the management of it, so their input will be helpful.
So they have some of that, and they have people management aspects that they're interested. They've always had it on their agenda, and now they're going to they're going to review their current charge on people management and how it would be impacted by this. And I think that was all.
That's quite a lot. We're now ready miscellaneous correspondence. Anybody have anything?
I have one. It's just following up on, Chris had mentioned in his town manager report. This is just a flyer for the Ghostly Haunted retail tour that's going to happen on October 27th. And sounds like it's going to be a really fun event and very much in the spirit of the tree lighting kind of activities that happen.
Fun.
So that's just a little flyer that they put together, but
I'm suspecting a lot of Halloween candy will be offered.
I suspect you're right.
Now, were you dressing up?
I am.
The new market will be on.
What's
there.
your costume?
On the cane.
That'll scare them.
Do you want to say a word about the non-A delegation visiting?
Oh, yes, when is
Well,
that?
I can say just a word. The Nanai, our sister city delegation, as is customary, is arriving at the end of this month. And I think we are meeting here in the townhouse with them on October 30th, if I have that date correct. I don't have the full agenda, but they will be visiting the school, and a number of our fellow citizens here in town are providing their homes for homestays for our visitors from Denai, and for those of us who have been to Denai, I will look forward to welcoming folks that we've had occasion to meet, so that should be.
Will the ceremonial robe be framed and able to be up by that
It
point?
should be.
I think that is the plan.
It's supposed to
have
be
it
up.
on display
Supposed to be up
here
by
in the
then.
town.
And where is it going to be?
I think in the hall,
Right
the
around
hall
the
there.
corner.
under glass, I think.
Yeah.
We have our bear ready.
Have a bear over here. And we've got a few other things that we should get in the
Display.
room. They do that.
Yes.
Right, you have to put everything out on display.
Are we going to name a Nanai Road?
Well, I don't I don't think we are, unless Chris has got some really clever way to solve this problem. I don't know. It would be,
Haven't thought of anything.
the road
Yeah.
they did was essentially a road that connected a public way with sort of some of the town buildings, so it wasn't like a
public access.
traditional
way, yeah.
public access road, but, you know, if we could do that, that'd be pretty cool, but.
Yeah. Nanai Village.
But I would just mention, Carmen Reese mentioned that she is trying to go to visit some of the special town meetings of other towns to see how they're using the cell phone for voting purposes. And I think there are about 3 or 4. It sounded like Wayland may be the one that they're going to go to, but
I
Isn't,
think we're
aren't some
scheduled
folks going with her?
to go do that.
Yeah.
I think you and I are going,
Yeah,
all right?
right.
and that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
To
I
see
think it'll be
how-
great.
Yeah. We're ready for the other committee nominations then.
Okay, so I nominate Arthur Schwolp of 281 Holdenwood Road and Jane Wells of 51 Chestnut Street to the Conservation Restriction Stewardship Committee. I also move to confirm the town manager appointments of William Herring of 214 Peter Spring Road to the Board of Assessors as an associate member for a term to expire May 31st, 2019, and Susan Livingston of 39 Wilson Road to the Board of Assessors as a full member for a term to expire May 31st, 2021, and Sharon Jones of 8 Eaton Road to the Concord Sustainability and Energy Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2021.
The second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to adjourn if there's no other business.
I don't think there's any other
Second.
business. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.